So do not forget homework. The chapter 3 terms due tomorrow night. Okay. So there's 17 of those, and I've got like, I think I got like 13 or so turned back in thus far. And let me see. Okay, so I have 5 views from the lecture yesterday. So you may or may not have seen this, but when we talked about 2 ways to propose an amendment, 2 ways to ratify an amendment, we got into this, all 27 have been ratified, or excuse me, proposed by a 2/3 vote in Congress. And then this is another way to do it. So as I said yesterday, if you were wanting to pass term limits for members of Congress, you would not probably see 2/3 of them vote to limit their terms in office. Okay. So there is another way, and that's through a national convention of the states. Okay. These were covered yesterday. All right. And then 2 ways to ratify. Okay, and that is through state legislatures, and you need 38 or 3/4 of the state legislatures to do that. And 26 of the 27 amendments have been ratified via that, and only one, the 21st Amendment, was ratified by special state conventions. Okay, and I talked about yesterday about what that kind of looks like. All right, and so you can see these people marching for beer. Okay, they wanted the amendment repealed, the 21st Amendment repealed, or the 18th Amendment repealed. Okay, now what I did want to start with today is kind of this talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay, and this actually was proposed way back in the 1930s. I mean, they were trying to get this done, and you might be able to discern by this picture on here that they're talking about equal rights for women. Okay, and what's important to understand constitutionally here, guys, is that I've talked about the 14th Amendment before. Okay, so the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery, right? Yes. Okay, now the 14th Amendment, I've talked about this, where it gives all people that are born here or become naturalized citizens of this country equal protection under the law, without regard to race, national origin, or religion. What it doesn't say, guys, is sex or gender, the 14th Amendment. So the reality is, and ladies, really, I'm talking to you. Okay, and we have one in here as well. Okay, is that women in this country do not have the same constitutional protections as everyone else. Okay, now this could be a little bit confusing, so try and stay with me on this. Okay, the Equal Rights Amendment, or the ERA, is necessary, some people believe, okay, because the word gender or sex is not mentioned in the Constitution as far as equal protection under the law goes. Okay, so in the 1970s, this amendment was proposed by Congress. They got 2/3 of both houses. Okay, and then it had to be sent to the states. All right, now, how many states do you need to ratify? 3/4 or 38. Okay. Now, most of these amendments have what are called a sunset period. So once they're proposed and sent to the states for ratification, generally you have 7 years to ratify. Okay, to get 3/4 of the state legislatures to agree to them. Okay, 7 years. That's after 7 years, there's a sunset, and that amendment goes away. It just doesn't stay out there forever. You know what I mean? So you got 7 years to get it ratified. Well, guys, in that 7-year period, this goes into the early 80s. They got 33 states to ratify. They needed 5 more. Okay, so Congress extended the period for ratification 2 years, trying to get those 5 more. Okay, and in that 2-year period, 5 states rescinded the ratification. Instead of adding 5 states, 5 states took it away. So you were back down to 28. Okay, so this never became an amendment. All right, now, from what I was reading about this morning, this amendment has been brought up in Congress, I think, every year, waiting for that 2/3 vote in both houses again. It just hasn't happened, okay? And here's why. All right, so try and pay attention to this, and I think you guys know a little bit about this case. This case right here, Brown versus Board of Education. 1954, this is Topeka, Kansas, okay? Did you guys learn about Jim Crow laws last semester? Okay, segregation of the races, okay? So in 1896, there was a Supreme Court case, Plessy versus Ferguson. And the ruling there, which was a 8-1 decision. Remember, there's 9 people on the Supreme Court. It was an 8-1 decision. The ruling here said separate is equal. So you could have segregation of the races. All right? And that would be, it could still be equal. So what you guys saw probably in history class were like separate drinking fountains for whites and coloreds, restrooms, seating areas on buses, restaurants, hotels. Some would not take, African Americans and stuff like that. We have a long history of this. So remember, the 14th Amendment that said equal protection under the law without regard for race, national origin, or religion, that was 1866. So guys, we're going to have legal segregation of the races in this country, really from the beginning, okay, all the way to 1954. So 1954, you get Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, okay? And Brown is the father of 3 African-American daughters that go to school in Topeka, on the wrong side of the railroad tracks, if you will, on the poor side of town. Now, guys, our schools are funded. We get a little bit of federal money, we get state money, but the biggest funding mechanism of public schools is property taxes. So if you live in the suburbs where they have bigger houses and more expensive houses, people pay more in property taxes, which means the schools have more money to build beautiful facilities, pay teachers well, do all these things, okay? If you live on the poor side of town, on the other side of the railroad tracks in many communities across this country, you don't have the same funding. So is it equal? No, it's not. Okay, and that's what this case says. Separate is not. Okay, so Brown was standing up for his daughters, who went to a school that was not equal to the school on the other side of town. Okay, and God bless him, right? I mean, because when you put yourself out there like that, you are going to become the target of attacks. Okay, whether they be actual physical attacks or, attacks on your character and everything else. Okay, so Brown versus Board of Education. Now, this is where we run into problems, ladies. Separate is not equal. That's the law of the land. And this is a 9-0 decision. And thank goodness it was. Okay, because this is going to upset a lot of people, especially in the South. How many guys saw, I think I brought this up. Remember the Titans? Okay, a lot of you guys have seen this movie. If you haven't, you should. It's wonderful. Okay, everybody can enjoy it. I know it's about football, but it's a lot more than football. Okay. Did I talk about this in the video? One of the videos? Remember the Titans? Did any of you guys remember reference to that? Okay, it might have been a different class. Because I talked about it recently in one of my classes. Who knows? Okay. But anyhow, I have some experience with this as somebody that lived in the North and moved to the South. Halfway through my junior year of high school. Okay, I went to a school that was way whiter than this school. Like, way white. All right? We had 2 black kids in the whole school. We had 2,600 students. Okay? Then I moved to Florida halfway through my junior year. The school was 60% white, 40% African American. Okay? So it was like a little bit of a culture shock for me. Not really, it wasn't that big of a deal. At the beginning, it was a little bit weird. Okay? But after, a few days, couple of weeks, I was like, oh, okay. Because I'd never really been around black people my whole life. Okay, some of you may not have. Okay, so what you are not educated about, you're ignorant about. Okay, and what I figured out pretty quickly is when I sat next to Patrick Moore and in English class that first day, who was a 6'4", very large black man. Okay, and I was a little bit, not a little bit, I was very intimidated by him. Okay, I'm a 5'9", 145-pound kid, and Patrick Moore today is the strength and conditioning coach for the University of Texas football team. He played linebacker at the University of Florida. Okay, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Okay, but when I sat down next to him, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you can. You're thinking, Mr. Ebright, you were ignorant. And yes, I was ignorant. Okay. So anyhow, so this is where we run into the issue and why some people think we need the ERA is that separate is not equal. Where are men and women in our society or even at this school separated? Down the hallway? At the end of the hallway? You've got a men's room. You got a ladies' room, right? You're separated. Down in the AC, the locker rooms, you're separated. Separate is not equal. So, guys, the reason why the Equal Rights Amendment did not pass or was not ratified was not because people said, well, women are, less than men. It was because of this decision here. Because if you cannot have equality and have separation based on this standing of this precedent of this case, this is the law of the land. Separate is not equal. So what people started realizing was you're going to have to integrate men and women. There will be no separation. Now, every guy in this room at the age of 18 has to register for something that the girls in here don't. And what's that? Selective service or the draft. Women would have to register for the draft, and if there were a draft, heaven forbid, okay, women would be drafted into the military just like men. You have issues like women in combat, which we have started to do. Okay, for most of the military history of this country, women were not allowed in combat. We have women fighter pilots today, many of which are very good. I mean, there was a story about an airline pilot not too long ago. That was a female airline pilot who was the first fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force. And then she had retired from the Air Force, was working for the airlines, and her skill saved like 180 people that were on the plane when something malfunctioned. She safely brought it down. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's a pretty cool story. All right. But women in combat is something that, you know, people disagree about. Okay. Some people feel it's okay. Some people, you know, if a woman wants to serve in combat in the infantry, we should let them. Obviously, guys, there are physical requirements you're going to have in certain areas. But anyhow, so I don't know when we're going to be ready for this Equal Rights Amendment, guys, but if we do get it, understand the consequences of it is that you cannot have separation of the sexes. Okay, we're starting to see this a little bit. I don't know if you probably not paying attention to the Equality Act dealing with transgenders. This is in the news a little bit, guys, where you have biologically males that identify as women, as teenagers being able to participate in female sports. Okay, and there's a big pushback on that by some and others that say it's discriminatory not to allow these biological male transgender females to participate in these sports. Okay, and you guys all have your own opinion on that. Okay, but it's this type of attitude is kind of sweeping across the country. Okay, and we'll see. You know what's going to happen is because the governor of South Dakota just passed a law, and the governor is signing it into law either yesterday or today. That says in South Dakota, biological male transgenders cannot participate in female sports. But President Biden is going to sign into the Equality Act that will allow that. So what we're going to have here, guys, is a federal law butting up against a state law. And if you go back in the notes a few slides, in Article 6 of the Constitution, there's something called the Supremacy Clause that gives federal supremacy over states when it comes to laws that conflict, and the U.S. Constitution over the state constitutions. So what's going to end up happening is, at some point, there's going to be a transgender student in South Dakota that will try to participate. They will be denied, and they will sue. There has to be a victim of the law for them to sue. You can't just bring up a lawsuit without a victim. Okay? That's how our court system works. All right, so if you talk about Roe v. Wade, okay, on abortion, okay, Roe was the woman that was denied an abortion. She sued. Does that make sense? And then it went all the way to the Supreme Court. All right, Brown was the victim. Okay, you got to have a victim. Okay, so we'll see how this plays out, and it'll be the Supreme Court that determines this, guys. All right, that's the importance of who those 9 justices are on the court, because they will change our culture. All right. So I just wanted to make you all aware of this Equal Rights Amendment, okay, and the issues that we find with it. There was a lot of feminism, like heavy feminism in the 1970s, and so they made a push, but didn't quite get there. Okay. Can I tell you a quick story real quick? All right. So in this case, we'll talk about this at the end of the semester when we talk about the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. But in case I don't get there or I forget to talk about it, let's talk about it now. Okay. This 8-1 decision. Okay. This is the majority opinion, and that sets the precedent. So from here on out, this is the majority opinion. This is how we read the Constitution and the law. Okay? Now, this over here is called a dissenting opinion. Okay? These are important because in 1954, they didn't really want to overturn this decision. A court today doesn't like to overturn an earlier court's decision because what are they saying about that earlier court? They didn't know what they were doing. They were wrong. They don't like to do that to people, even though they're dead. Okay? They don't like to do that. But if they do overturn an earlier court decision, they like to use the dissenting opinion from that case, because that says at least one of these people on the court was correct. You follow me? Everybody with me? All right. So the guy that wrote the dissenting opinion in 1896 was a guy named John Marshall Harlan. Justice Harlan. Okay. In 1954, the guy that wrote the majority opinion for the court was a guy named John Harlan. His grandson. So his grandfather was on the Supreme Court. This guy obviously went to law school, and he was eventually appointed to the Supreme Court. He affirmed his grandfather's decision, dissenting opinion, from 60 years earlier. And that's a pretty cool story. Okay. I took a class in graduate school on the Warren Court, which was 1954 to 1969. Okay. And this court, between these years, made a lot of critical decisions, okay, including Brown here. Okay. So Harlan was a conservative justice, and it was a 9-0 decision, and that's a pretty neat story there. Okay, I wanted to share with you guys. All right, so moving forward, what we have left, guys, is, and this is again, this is just a graphic showing you 2 ways to propose, 2 ways to ratify an amendment. Okay. Really, all I have left, guys, is to talk about the amendments. Okay, so when we get back in full on Monday after break, we'll be doing some exercises. We'll have everybody here. Okay. Did I tell you who else is in your class? We talked about that. Okay. So everybody be here. A couple of you. I mean, we may just have to compromise on where we're sitting. All right. And if anybody is really worried about close contact with other people, see me after class, and I'll try and separate you a little bit without, making it obvious, because I understand some people are a little bit worried about it. Okay. I polled my house yesterday and asked them, okay, well, how they're feeling about it. And I think 2 of them said they were freaking out about it. So if you're freaking out about it, let me know. Other than just having to be here for 7 hours a day. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. All right. So we know about the Bill of Rights. Okay. The first 10 amendments. These were ratified 2 years after the Constitution. So 1791 was when all of the amendments were ratified. Okay. There were actually 12 proposed, but only 10 ratified. Okay. And what's interesting, and we're going to get into great detail on this next week, okay, after break. The first 8 are very important. The basic rights, and we know the First Amendment, I think, religion, speech, press, peacefully assemble, that sort of thing. Bear arms with 2. And then you get those that are accused of a crime, which are very important, okay? And you guys, we talked about the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, the English Bill of Rights, where a lot of these rights are found in English documents that we're going to adopt as well, okay? And then 9 and 10 really focus on the states and the people versus the federal government, okay? And I'll go in, like I said, go into great detail over that. So basically what we're looking at with these 27 amendments, I'm going to be kind of talking about groupings of amendments here in the note, okay? So this is obviously a large grouping of amendments, 10 of them. And in the background is the actual text of the Bill of Rights, which is over there too. That's it on that slide. Okay, when you guys are ready, I'll move on. Guys, when we're done studying the amendments, everybody's going to have one sheet of paper with all 27 amendments on it written in one sentence. We're going to break it down into one sentence, the most important parts of it. okay? It doesn't have to be a, I'm not an English teacher. It doesn't have to, complete sentence or a well-structured sentence. It just has to be a sentence. One line. We'll just say one line. Okay. So here's another grouping of amendments. Okay, we've kind of talked about these as well. So sometimes we'll see several amendments in American history right after a major war. Okay, so obviously after the Civil War, we're going to see 13, 14, 15. Okay, so periods of great social change sometimes follow wars. Okay, after the Civil War, we're going to ban slavery. We're going to make all slaves or people that lived here or were born here or naturalized citizens of this country and give them equal protection. Not really until 1954, right? You with me on that, right? I mean, even though this was part of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, we're still working on it. We're still trying to fulfill it, okay? And then the 15th gave voting rights to men, all men, regardless of race or religion or national origin, okay? And obviously, ladies, we're going to have to wait for the 19th Amendment, right? Okay? And again, that's because they don't use that word gender or sex in the Constitution, okay? So in the early 1900s, we get the expansion of democracy with the 17th Amendment. We've talked about this before, and then the 19th Amendment. Good. We're going to be able to wrap this up pretty quick. Anybody traveling over the break? Where are you going? Colorado. Skiing. Don't come back on crutches now. Owens, you going somewhere? You traveling?
Yeah, I'm going to
St. Louis. Well, neither one of you are going where it's warmer. That's where I like to go on spring break, but I haven't had spring break in 23 years. That's what happens when you're a baseball coach in the spring. Okay, good? Yeah. Just mention this literacy test. This was one way to oppress voting. Poor, uneducated people. They make them take a literacy test or poll taxes, which we'll talk about later. This is actually not covered by an amendment, but by the Voting Rights Act of 1970 outlawed literacy tests. Okay. And this is the last slide. Okay. So we're done with the notes here. We're going to learn the amendments when we get back, and then usually that takes more than 2 days. So I'm saying you won't have the Chapter 3 test the week you get back, but the following Monday, probably. Maybe Friday. Might be able to get it by Friday. We'll see. We'll have a review day. I got to get used to this. I don't have to take 2 days to test anymore, right? Which is kind of nice. That'll speed things up a little bit, okay? All right, so the 16th Amendment, okay, expanding government powers, okay, and then 18th Amendment, okay, so you have the income tax here, allow government to tax you instead of the states, and then the 18th Amendment regulated the manufacture, sale, transportation, and consumption of alcoholic beverages. And then this last line here is, guys, the ratification deadline of around 7 years, okay, for these amendments, okay? But if you notice here, the 27th Amendment, the last one we had, was actually proposed in 1789, along with the Bill of Rights, but was not ratified until 1992. It did not have a deadline. And I have a really good story to share with you about that, but not today. We'll do it when we do the 27th Amendment in class, okay? And that, my friends, are the Chapter 3 notes. So I'm going to sign off, guys. Keep this video short for the class later today. And Natalie, thanks for joining in too. Good to see you guys this morning. And I'll see you guys tomorrow, Friday. And yeah, I'll have something for you tomorrow.